So what is Tempe Accelerates?
This is a wonderful opportunity to give the presenters and the various areas that are presenting your comments. That's really what this is all about. This is a constructive process to help all the different areas of the city come together and help us all achieve our goals.
Tempe Accelerates is a way to present our overarching goals and achievements to make Tempe a better place.
We will be discussing the cardiac arrest survival rates and our council priority of being safe and secure.
These measurable goals operationalize the 5 council priorities for our cities, such as safe and secure communities, quality of life, sustainable growth and development, financial stability and vitality, and strong community connections.
So our performance measure is number 4.11 to achieve a tree canopy of 25 trees per acre on our as an average on our city properties.
This is an opportunity for the community and Tempe employees to participate by offering ideas and solutions, as well as asking questions about how to reach our targets.
I'm going to talk about 2 performance measures that focus on energy. The first one is energy reduction. So this is a dashboard showing the Kiwanis Recreation Center after the solar carports were installed, and the pink area shows you all the energy consumption at the Kiwanis Rec Center, and the green bars show the solar panels, the solar energy production.
The sessions consist of presentations from different departments and partners that show the goal's current measure as well as our target for the future. The departments also discuss the efforts and strategies we are making in order to achieve our desired performance.
And so we have a very visionary goal, and that is to reduce fatal and serious injury crashes to 0.
So we're here to talk about feeling of safety in parks, and the specific council priority that looks at or is under is safe and secure communities.
Join us for Tempe Accelerates, a series of data-driven collaborative strategy sessions to explore how these goals help the community and what we can do to reach our targets.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Tempe Accelerates for June 24th, 2021. My name is Andrew Ching. I'm the city manager for the city of Tempe. It's my pleasure today to present 2 presentations on 2 of our performance measurements here at the city. One is 3.12, first one, Municipal Equality Index, the second, 3.13, Disability Social Inclusion. Both presentations will have approximately 10 minutes each. We invite you to suggest strategies in the Q&A feature of the Teams application, which the presenters will have time to discuss at the end of their presentations. You can find that feature in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. A feedback survey will be available on our website. We will provide the link in the Q&A, and we would appreciate you filling that out as well. In addition, we will provide links to our performance measures dashboard so you can explore and join us in achieving positive outcomes for our community. There may be some time delays or technical challenges as we go through the presentations, and we appreciate your patience as we work through any of those. And now I'd like to introduce our presenters for the first presentation, and that is Darren Martinez, the Tempe GSA co-chair and executive assistant to the police chief, and Jonae Harrison, our equity and inclusion manager. Take it away, Darren and Jonae.
Good afternoon. My name is Darren Martinez, and I'm the executive assistant to the police chief at the Tempe Police Department, and I also serve as co-chair of the City of Tempe Gay Straight Alliance.
Thanks, Darren, and good afternoon to everyone. Jonae Harrison, equity and inclusion manager here at the City of Tempe. So let's get started. Welcome to Council Priority Performance Measurement 3.12 presentation on the Municipal Equality Index. Next slide. What is the Municipal Equality Index? It is an index promulgated by the Human Rights Campaign, which examines how inclusive cities are in their laws, services, and policies for those who not only live, but also work in the city of Tempe. It is specifically looking at how inclusive we are for the LGBTQ community. It has an index where there's a possible perfect score of 100. So to explore what the standards for credit are for the MEI, you can certainly look at the 3rd bullet point in that link that is shown there. Next slide, please. So why is the MEI important? There are many protections that the state of Arizona has granted, but some of those protections are not present in our state's legislation. The MEI therefore exists to encourage local municipalities to fill those gaps through our local ordinances and policies. While the state is still legislating its policies, the residents and businesses and visitors of Tempe can truly rely on the city because we have enacted ordinances and policies where the state still has not. Next slide, please. So what is performance measure 3.12 specifically? It falls under council priority number 3, quality of life, and is meant to enhance the quality of life for all Tempe residents and workers as it pertains specifically to equity and diversity. The MEI therefore measures what that quality of life is as it protects in our laws, programs, and policies. The perfect score of 100 that you just heard me mention falls under 5 categories that you see listed. So how do we perform in our anti-discrimination? How do we perform as an employer? What are the services we provide? How is law enforcement positioned within our city? And whether our LGBTQ equality is reflected in our leadership. We'll discuss some of that more, but when we look at council priority number 3 and the emphasis on equity and diversity, it's important to understand what we mean by equity in this context. So let's go to the next slide with Darren.
Thank you, Jonay. Equity under performance measure 3.12 is the full embodiment of that measure. This measures how we are providing equitable service to one of the city's most vulnerable populations, the LGBTQ community. Not just because of their vulnerability in and of itself, but because of the intersectionality of the LGBTQ population with other vulnerable demographics. Next slide, please. When we look at households within the United States broadly, within opposite-sex couples, we see 61.4 million married, 8 million are unmarried, with 51.4 million children living in these households. This information comes from the 2019 Annual Social and Economic Supplement. Next slide. Now, if we compare that to same-sex couples in the United States who are living together, we see a dramatic decrease in numbers, in some cases not even making 10% of the population. This information also comes from the 2019 Annual Social and Economic Supplement. But let's look even more narrowly as it relates to cities. Next slide, please. In 2017, look specifically to same-sex households. Phoenix is 7th down for number of households, purple representing male couples and green representing female couples. Although Phoenix is 7th down with regard to households, Phoenix has almost equal split between male and female households. Regardless, same-sex households make up less than 1% of all US households. This, in fact, demonstrates that the LGBTQ community is a vulnerable population. And so why is it important to protect this population? Well, that will be addressed on the next slide. It's important because creating safe places for vulnerable populations matters. We do this through anti-discrimination laws, how we act as an employer, and what services we provide. The city of Tempe is a leader with regards to the anti-discrimination ordinance and was an example for the cities of Mesa and Scottsdale when they passed their own anti-discrimination ordinances in 2021. More importantly, we make sure that supporting our employees through the city's Gay Straight Alliance, also known as the GSA, which has galvanized employee base through the development of 3 new committees related to policy, events, and marketing, as well as reviewing and evaluating HR policies to ensure they are inclusive of the employee base. Our municipal services are also reaching youth through partnership with the Mayor's Youth Advisory Commission. All 3 of these things, laws, employer, and services, act to create a safe place. Now I will pass to Jonay for further discussion.
Thanks so
Next
much.
slide. Sorry.
No worries, Darren. Thanks so much. So on this slide, you'll see we're grateful to report that the city has achieved a perfect 100 score since 2014. In 2013, we had a score of 72, but you'll see that we immediately did the hard work to rectify and went from that score of 72 to a perfect score the following year. So let's look at how the city ranks compared to other Valley cities. Next slide. Tempe, you'll see highlighted in the orange box, has a perfect score, again, of 100. You can receive a perfect score through baseline points in those 5 categories that we've already described and that you'll see at the top of the screen, or through a combination of baseline points and flex points, which I sometimes call bonus points. As you'll see, the city has its perfect score from those 5 categories, those 5 baseline categories, but we also have 9 bonus or flex points that we're working very hard to maintain and increase as well. As you'll see, the other cities are doing the excellent work of trying to get to perfect scores as well, and we certainly commend them too. Next slide. These series of slides that we're going into now simply show how we're performing. So the first one in the first category is the anti-discrimination laws pertaining to employment, housing, and public accommodations. Here we received a perfect score of 30 out of 30. What you see are 2 different sets of boxes. The white boxes refer to how we're doing with respect to sexual orientation in these areas, and the blue boxes show how we're doing with respect to gender identity. Next slide. The municipality as an employer now. We've received 28 out of 28 points in the subcategories of anti-discrimination in employment, transgender inclusive healthcare benefits, our city contractor anti-discrimination policies, as well as being an inclusive workplace. Next slide, please. Under Municipal Services, which is one of those subcategories, we again have a perfect score of 12 out of 12. We have and maintain a Human Relations Commission, and we enforce their policies, as well as have an LGBTQ liaison at the executive level in the city manager's office. Next slide, please. Now, law enforcement, our 4th category. Law enforcement has an LGBTQ policy liaison, as well as does consistent reporting of hate crime statistics to the FBI, which has yielded our perfect score in that category. Next slide, please. And then finally, our 5th category, leadership on LGBTQ equality. You'll see we have a perfect score of 8 out of 8 there. So how do we do that? How do we maintain these perfect scores, and how do we move to increase our bonus points? We do that through strategies. That's going to be discussed moving forward with Darren on the next slide, please.
Thank you, Jonay. When we explore the dashboard on council priorities, see that we have 3 strategies to support the perfect score and to increase our flex and bonus points. You'll see those strategies through our youth work, our elderly work, and supporting the transgender population. Next slide. Our flex and bonus points are the areas that allow us to move from not just a score of 100, but to a maximum raw score of 122 points. Additional points can be received by providing domestic partner benefits, providing services to LGBTQ youth, those experiencing homelessness, and those living with HIV and AIDS, as well as having openly LGBTQ elected officials and leaders. We as a city have already received 9 points in these areas. The remaining 13 points can be achieved in a variety of ways, but the city is considering how to add points through providing services to LGBTQ older adults and the consideration of restrictive state laws. The City of Tempe is committed to maintaining its perfect score, not because it's a number, but because it represents our values of equity and inclusion. So we look to these bonus points as areas where we can improve in our delivery of programs and services. Therefore, we are excited to use this time to hear and explore your recommendations on these areas and even areas we haven't considered. Next slide. But increasing flex points is not without its challenges. Challenges we face are around centering vulnerable voices without being prescriptive. That means instead of the city prescribing to the community what services, programs, and policies we're looking to implement, we are truly looking for the community that is most affected to help us create those services, programs, and policies so that we can prioritize getting those bonus points in a way that our city needs. Next slide, please. And that is the end of our formal presentation. We want to thank everyone for their time and attention to this very important topic, and we welcome any questions.
Good afternoon. This is Wydell Holmes with the City of Tempe Strategic Management and Diversity Office, and I would like to invite our viewers to suggest their strategy ideas in the chat feature located in the upper right-hand corner of their screen. And thank you to Janae and Darren. We do have a couple of questions that I'd like for you to begin with. You mentioned the census data. Can you tell us why it's from 2017?
Sure, Wydell. If you remember, we just went through a 2020 census count. That's our big census count that happens every 10 years, which includes information like households. So we just completed that information last year. So we'll be able to update Tempe specific information once those census findings are made available. So I'll be specifically excited when we were using Phoenix as an example to get Tempe household information once that data is available.
Great, thank you. And with all of the MEI scoring criteria, what are the ones that are changing and what strategies do we have as a community for achieving that criteria?
Yeah, thanks, Wydell. I think, let's see. So the Human Rights Campaign recently notified us that they were all asking the cities to make sure that the city's transgender healthcare coverage includes all medical visits effective the upcoming year. And with that said, the City of Tempe is proud to announce that we have heard back from our medical provider and have been informed that the appropriate language has been updated in our plan.
Great, thank you. One of the foundational strategies that you mentioned was the city's anti-discrimination ordinance. Can you tell us a little bit about when that was passed?
Sure, I'll take that one as well, Wydell. So after many years of hard work, the city passed an anti-discrimination ordinance back in 2014. And part of that ordinance, it basically indicated that it's unlawful for City of Tempe businesses to discriminate on the basis of a variety of things, to include race, color, religion, disability, gender, familial status, but also sexual orientation and gender identity. It was further revised in 2016, and this is significant because the City of Tempe was one of the first cities in the state to adopt an anti-discrimination ordinance. And this just goes to show that Tempe has a long-standing reputation for placing importance on diversity and inclusivity in the city. And as a city, we continue to grow and adapt, but we're constantly looking at ways to be more inclusive.
So that's a great lead into the next question. You mentioned in the flex bonus points and also aligned to Tempe's values with the MEI criteria that we have wonderful programs and services for LGBTQ youth. Can you talk a little bit about the potential strategies that you're exploring for older LGBTQ adults?
You know, Wydell, I'll take this one. I'm so excited about this one because the HRC, who actually puts out the MEI index, had a wonderful webinar about how to assist and provide programs and services for LGBTQ elderly adults, especially given COVID and issues of isolation and housing challenges. And so the city recently began an age-friendly initiative, which convened a group of internal and external stakeholders to look at this very thing, our elderly population or our older population. And this group is certainly committed at looking at all aspects of inclusivity, including how do we become a age-friendly city for our LGBTQ elders. So super excited to see what's on the horizon for that, Wydell.
Great, thank you, Janae. That concludes the questions that we have that were shared by our audience. And I did want to remind our viewers that we would love your suggestions and strategies. You can also, if you have questions and specific strategies you would like to provide the city, please reach out to Janae and to Darren. Their information is on the slide that you see on your screen. I also would like for you to complete a survey, and also if you want to see future sessions, we've dropped the link into the chat. And so with that, I'll turn it back over to our city manager, Andrew Ching.
Thank you, Wydell. Appreciate it. And thank you so much to our first presenters, Janae and Darren. Excellent job. Our next presentation will be regarding performance measure 3.13, disability social inclusion. And our presenter for this performance measure will be Nanette Odell, Tempe's ADA specialist. Take it away, Nanette.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Andrew. Again, as Andrew mentioned, my name is Nanette Odell, and I am a person with a disability who has also lived or worked with people with disabilities literally my entire life. I am absolutely honored to be here and part of this amazing team and to talk to you more about disability and social inclusion. Next slide, please. Next slide. There we go. So first and foremost is when we talk about disability, we want to take a look at the definition. And essentially, we're looking at any condition of the body or mind that makes it difficult for a person to do certain activities and interact with the world around them. And I think what's important to remember with this is that we're always looking at from very mild to very severe. It could be any one of those ranges, but this is the formal definition. Next slide. The truth is, though, is that the majority of disabilities are invisible. As you can see from the slide here, we look at a variety of different areas. Again, majority of them being invisible, and of course, most of them going beyond the need of ramps for access. There's a lot of other areas where people need assistance. Next slide. Statistically, in the United States, at least 1 in 4 adults have some type of a disability. And again, this is specifically looking at adults. So again, about 26%. Next slide. And if we get more specific, it's actually about 25.6%. And in Arizona, it's a little bit higher at 25.8%. Again, we're looking specifically at adults in Arizona who have some type of disability. Next slide. As we look at Tempe specifically, though, we want to take a look and see kind of where the ranges are. And so again, I've been mentioning that we're talking about adults, but the truth is there's also a lot of children that have some type of disability. And as you can see from the slide, the older you get, the greater the chances are that some type of a disability will impact you. Next slide. Reason it impacts you is because the truth is people with disabilities make up the fastest growing minority population in the world, and barriers to full and equal access can affect people in a lot of other ways. Again, we talked about buildings and facilities, parks, transportation, services, communication. Again, this somehow relates to physical disabilities, but also it can be there can be barriers related to other types of disabilities and the different needs. Next slide. So imagine for just a moment a person who has a mobility disability, for example, who uses public transportation, and they can get to their job, and then afterwards they can go out and enjoy dinner with their family or enjoy retail shopping, whatever it is, just like everyone else. But the truth is, for many people, this is truly just a dream. Next slide. The reason it's just a dream is because if you imagine just the opposite, imagine that you're not able to get down a curb cut, to get to transportation, to get to a job, to get to retail. For some people, again, there's truly a lot of barriers, and that's one of the reasons why we're here today. Next slide. What we want, our goal, of course, with this performance measure is we want equity in access to live, to work, and to play. Next slide. So what we've developed is something called TDIP. Essentially, it stands for Tempe Disability Inclusion Plan, and that's actually made up of two different performance measures. One is 3.14, and that's more bricks and mortar. That's the ADA transition plan that, again, relates to stairs and doors and ramps and everything else. Again, bricks and mortar, but really what we're here to talk about is disability and social inclusion at 3.13. And this is a metrics, essentially it's a prototype. And our goal, of course, is to achieve a perfect score of 100 on this self-assessment tool of disability and social inclusion. Next slide. Now we're doing this through a metrics of 5 key pillars that are being developed and are being refined still with the collaboration of the City of Tempe ADA liaisons. These liaisons will develop then into essentially divide up into 5 subcommittees that will be working to really focus on each one of the 5 pillars I'll describe now. Next slide. So you can see there's 5 pillars. It looks like there's 4, but actually the one on the bottom, the blue pillar called culture of inclusion, is a foundational pillar that really the other 4 kind of lean upon then. So we're going to go into more details about those. But again, you can see 3.14 is at the very bottom. That's again bricks and mortar. It's very important. So our culture of inclusion there is again a pillar that is helping the other ones, and that's where we're going to go into our more details. So next slide, please. So as we talk about staff training and essentially the culture of inclusion, it's important to remember that we need to start with staff training, internal procedures to help ensure that the other measures are more successful. Next slide. It's also important to make sure that we have accessible and inclusive websites, print and video materials, and of course we want to make sure that we invite shareholders to these discussions. Next slide. We talk about program access. Program access ensures including accessible, inclusive city programs and city meetings, recreation, and even temporary events. Next slide. And of course, the health and well-being and safety of Tempe residents is a very high priority, and this includes efforts from accessible housing options to emergency preparedness resources. Next slide. Self-sufficiency, very important also because, of course, basic sidewalk connections, public transportation options, as well as employment and shopping access are important to maintaining self-sufficiency. Next slide. So where are we? Well, we're obviously starting from scratch. While there's other cities who've developed great efforts, we're trying to do something that's a little bit unique and innovative, and that's sort of the Tempe way anyway. So we're working right now to create this prototype and really narrow down the focus. We're doing that again with the Commission on Disability Concerns and the Tempe ADA liaisons. We're really taking a look at what we might be able to influence. And of course, it's very important to make sure that we can measure these. So we're determining how we can measure and then strategies that are based on data-driven outcomes. And of course, sort of going full circle is that internal cultural shift, making sure that our employees are very well trained and that we really work to increase our proactive efforts. So next slide, please. So as we talk about measuring success, here's an example of a measurement tool. There's a community survey that goes out on a regular basis, and it has already been collecting this data. And we're hoping that as it continues to collect this data, that we're going to see increases in some of these numbers. Let's say, for example, related to how well does the city treat residents regardless of age and disability, the Tempe's engagement and inclusion of those with dementia. So we're really taking a look at these different tools here to see if we can create and propel an increase in these numbers and in the response to all of our residents, including those with disabilities. Next slide. So something important to remember as we kind of start to wrap up is that disability does not discriminate. It intersects absolutely every other disability group. Disability can happen in an instant, and of course it can be temporary or it can be permanent. But regardless, disability will impact all of us directly or indirectly. And that's why we're here today, and that's why we would really value your feedback. Next slide. So thank you so very much for your time.
Thank you, Nanette. I would like to facilitate a little bit of the strategy discussion. I'm Wydell Holmes with the City of Tempe's Strategic Management and Diversity Office, and have a couple questions in regards to the prototype. What did you base the 5 pillars on?
Well, the Department of Justice actually very specifically talks about a requirement for program access, and program access can seem very vague, but that is certainly one of the pillars that we listed because it's so very important. So that's one. Effective communication is another one the Department of Justice very specifically lists. And then while it doesn't list specifically the term culture of inclusion, it does talk about the importance of training. And so we've actually over the last few years been doing a culture of inclusion survey, and we've seen improvements, and I'm sure we're going to continue to see those improvements. So between the Department of Justice requirements and then of course the National Council on Disability and a lot of research we've done, that's how we came up with those 5 pillars. And what's important to know is that, again, there's a lot of things underneath each one of those pillars that we're really working towards.
Thanks, Nanette. You noted on one of your slides that the culture of inclusion is shown as a foundational piece for the other pillars. Can you explain how that interplays with the other pillars?
Absolutely. Well, as you know, of course, I hope we all know, is that we have an amazing team of people here in the city of Tempe. They're dedicated to access and inclusion. We want to continue to provide a focused effort to help us all grow in this area and to help us more effectively reach each of our goals in these other pillars. So it really starts and never really ends, but it starts with the staff and making sure that they're most effectively prepared for these other areas for all of our residents.
Because this is a prototype and probably will become a national model with the innovation that the team has put behind it, can you tell us a little bit about the strategies that you're going to employ to create that culture of inclusion?
Well, one of the things we're looking at doing is we're really looking at providing a good amount of training. We're also looking at making sure that we have not only an external facing website, which we already do, an ADA website, and that will, by the way, really work towards making sure that we have a lot of resources for our residents, for our businesses, but an internal page in a sense also that staff can go to. Internal trainings, we'll have recordings of those. We'll make sure that, again, we provide a lot of training, that we have kind of a Q&A for staff to go to. If someone wants to know some more information about what is our parking ordinance, somebody calls them, our staff know immediately where to go to find that information. And then, of course, setting a good example, making sure that we're using inclusive language, person-first language. So as far reaching, also making sure the ADA liaison group is another piece to this, making sure that we have somebody who's a primary point of contact in each one of our departments or potentially divisions that are being even more intensely trained in regards to access and inclusion, and then they can act as a point of contact for their departments also. So it's quite a well-rounded process, but it seems to be working very well so far, and I'm very confident that we're going to continue to see those numbers go up.
Great. It sounds like you have a strong strategy around your ADA liaisons in each of the areas. So what about strategies for things that we can't, quote, control, such as housing, employment, and retail? How do we influence those areas in our community?
Well, I think you've got it there. We can't control, and so we really looked at that as how do we measure? So while we can't control, like you said, we can influence, and I think we can also provide a lot of great resources. So I regularly get calls. I had a call this afternoon, someone asking about accessible parking at a local business. And so I was able to quickly provide him with some information. So again, making sure that we provide that information. Eventually it's going to be on our website that they can quickly go to, where I can quickly send them some information. But I would also like to see us eventually start to provide some classes that are specifically for housing representatives, for retail representatives, for restaurateurs. And these classes that I'm hoping to eventually do will not only relate to the ADA, again, the structure in terms of buildings and facilities and what's required, but also the importance of inclusion for people with disabilities, including employment, and just how very important it is to include people with disabilities in our employment pools and recognizing their value. So that's going to take a little bit of time. It's really easy to say, okay, we're going to change from this to this in terms of a structure, potentially. We're going to raise signs, lower dispensers, but changing a culture, and especially when you're influencing external forces, that's going to take a little bit more time, but I'm absolutely confident that we're going to do it. The city of Tempe's been on the right track for a very long time, and I think we're all very well known as a result of that. It's quite an innovative city.
I have another question in regards to from our audience, and this is in regards to bricks and mortar. The question is, they searched for an ADA apartment for their quadriplegic son, December 2019, and there was absolutely nothing available. Their son can work, he can pay rent, there were no open apartments. What are we doing to open more in the city of Tempe?
That's an area I wish I had more control in general, but we have to recognize what our limitations are in that sense. But your question is not a new one. I would say that it's actually a fairly common question in regards to housing. Again, we're working to increase influence. I know that there's at least one apartment complex in Tempe that is really kind of a pillar one. And one of the things I'm looking to do is, as I do get concerns from residents in regards to apartments, is I'm working quite diligently with some of these apartments on what their requirements are in terms of accessible parking, accessible paths, working, of course, with our planning department, and really trying to encourage them to create more access and inclusion. Number one, for the bare minimum of what you're required to do, but then to go beyond that. And in some cases, I'm kind of pointing out what other apartment complexes are doing and how they have a waiting list. So there are people out there who need accessible housing, and unfortunately, there's just not enough. So again, this is something that's going to take a little bit more time, but I assure you, it's something that we're looking at, and hopefully there will be more solutions in the near future.
Speaking of solutions and resources, can you tell us a little bit about Access Tempe and how some of the resources might provide some strategies for that question on housing, or even just accessible parking, transportation, and adaptive recreation?
Well, Access Tempe, at least from my recollection, it's been around for a little while. And I remember when it first came out, and it was really at that time more focused on accessible retail, kind of identifying where accessible retail was located. And that again is something we're going to want to continue to work on. But I think as we work on expanding this, working on trying to help identify, I don't want to say identify what's compliant, because that's kind of a sticky word, but we do want to make sure that, again, we're providing a positive influence and resources for businesses to at least come to code as a requirement, but then really do what they need to do to invite people with disabilities, invite everybody to be able to live, work, and play. So I'm hoping that as we grow the Access Tempe, that'll absolutely be a piece of it. I've been here since the end of December. There's a lot of really great things happening. I wish I could tell you this is all going to happen really fast, but the truth is this does take some time, and your feedback is really helpful. So I hope that you'll continue to provide feedback, and contact me if you have specific questions, and I'd be more than happy to talk to anybody in regards to how to make some of these happen within their own buildings, facilities, apartments, retail.
Okay. On that note, in regards to Access Tempe, I will drop in the chat our webpage that has the availability and resources that are mapped out for our residents across the community. I do have, that concludes our questions from our audience. I do want to let the audience know that we did have a comment that I'd like to share, and it was relating to our MEI score. And the comment is, thank you for the breakdown of the MEI criteria, and it's great to see the city excelling in all areas that the HRC measures. This is from the MIAC advisor, which is the Mayor's Youth Advisory Commission. And he states that he's happy to see that the city intends to address how we support LGBTQ and youth. He would also like to remind our viewers that there is the MIAC Youth Town Hall report from 2019 that they can reference for further information. And I'll be happy to drop that in the chat as well. And with that, just a reminder to complete the survey, and I'll turn it over to Andrew Ching, our city manager.
All right, thank you again, Wydell, and many thanks to Nanette Odell for her great presentation. Very important. Some of the most, in my opinion, and I think many of us would agree, the most important work that we can do as a local government is the work that we do and the efforts that we do to provide services to some of our most vulnerable communities within our city. And certainly the work we do for people who have disabilities to make our city more accessible, and the work that we have done as well as, if not better than any community in our region, and perhaps in Arizona, with our, a string of perfect scores in the Municipal Equality Index, to me shows exactly what level of commitment and dedication we have to working with all communities and to give everyone an equal opportunity to grow and live and thrive in the city of Tempe, and to have equal access to all of our services. So hearing these two presentations back to back today, from my perspective as city manager, is really a testament to the kind of great work that we can and should do as a city, and to the great staff in our strategic management and diversity office. So big thanks to Darren Martinez, to Janae Harrison, to Nanette Odell. Thank you so much to Wydell and to Megan Hutchison for moderating and for all the technical assistance here. That is going to conclude. That will be the end of our Tempe Accelerate sessions for the spring and the summer. We are very grateful for you to have joined us for all of these sessions. They are available both in our Granicus system and for replay on Tempe 11. Please continue to check our website that you currently see on the screen, which is right there on the slide, for upcoming fall and winter sessions dates. So we will see you then when we resume in the fall and winter. And until then, thank you so much. And we appreciate your attention to the great work that we're doing here at the City of Tempe. Have a great day.